Hi everyone, welcome to today's Queer Spirit video. Today I am going to be talking about the Greek god Apollo, who many of you are probably familiar with, but for those of you who are not, Apollo is the god of light, specifically sunlight. He's associated with the sun. He has a twin sister Artemis, who is associated with the moon. Apollo is also the god of enlightenment, so things like reason and logic and all those things. He's also the god of music and father to the muses, so in that sense the god of inspiration, or the deity from which inspiration flows, if you will. He is also the god of prophecy, and his major temple is in Delphi, which is the home of the Oracle of Delphi, a priestess who prophesies, and considered one of the most definitive sources of prophecy in Greek mythology in terms of accuracy, but often only in retrospect, because she often tells you the exact truth, but in riddles that make it very hard to understand until it has already come to pass. So, Apollo has, in Greek mythology, a very long list of lovers and love interests. Some of those were reciprocal, and some of those were unrequited love on Apollo's part. So Apollo fell for deities, a great many nymphs, who are semi-deities or minor deities, and quite a number of human beings, both men and women. Today, I'm going to be telling you the story of Apollo and Hyacinthus, who was one of the human men that Apollo fell in love with. So the story goes that Apollo chanced upon Hyacinthus, who was, by all accounts, an incredibly beautiful young man, and fell completely head over heels in love with him. We might, in today's language, call this a particularly intense crush, because it results in Apollo basically abandoning all of his other godly things. He stops playing the lyre, his stringed musical instrument. He stops attending to his temple in Delphi. He stops everything except hanging out with Hyacinthus. All of his attention is on Hyacinthus. Hyacinthus, for his part, was also quite taken with Apollo. And so the two of them are a reciprocal love connection and proceed to spend a lovely time in each other's company, doing what people do when they're in love, which is basically spending all their time together and not thinking about really much of anything else. So as I said, Hyacinthus was apparently a very beautiful young man, and so Apollo was not the only deity whose eye he caught. Zephyr, the west wind, was also in love with Hyacinthus. However, Zephyr was not so lucky as Apollo in having Hyacinthus' love in return. Hyacinthus really didn't want to have anything to do with Zephyr, was only had eyes for Apollo. And this made Zephyr, of course, insanely jealous. So, one of the activities of young men in Greece at the time is discus throwing, which, as it sounds, involves throwing a metal disc as far as you possibly can, and the winner is the one who can throw it the farthest in the accurate direction. And so, the story goes, one day Apollo and Hyacinthus are hanging out together, throwing discuses, presumably trying to impress each other, and Zephyr sees this and decides in a moment of jealous rage that if he can't have Hyacinthus, neither can Apollo. And so Zephyr blows one of Apollo's discs out of the air into Hyacinthus' head, killing him instantly. Splits open his head, he falls to the ground, he's bleeding on the ground. Apollo rushes over, being a god, attempts to revive Hyacinthus to life, but is unsuccessful. He cannot save him, and Hyacinthus dies. And out of the blood on the ground, Apollo creates a flower. And now you would think that the flower that Apollo created from Hyacinthus' blood would be the hyacinth, because that would make sense. But no. In fact, it was either the iris or the larkspur, and the people who saw this flower in ancient Greece described whichever flower it was as having I written on its petals, in Greek, of course, because that is the sound of the wail of grief that Apollo made when Hyacinthus died. There is a version of this story where Apollo succeeds in reviving Hyacinth and making him a god with him in Olympus, which is a much happier version of the story, but in most versions, Hyacinthus dies. So I think it's pretty clear that Apollo belongs in the queer pantheon, as we might describe it today, because his sexual and romantic interests are quite varied. So he's into gods and demigods and humans of all genders, and he loves deeply and intensely. This is not the only story where Apollo's romantic or sexual interest causes him to kind of lose track of everything else. So Apollo, clearly one of our queer deities, and I hope you enjoyed learning a little of his story today. Thanks for watching. Bye.